Hello and welcome to the Institute of Advanced Studies. I'm Professor Ksenia Chmutina. I'm the director of the IIS. And it's wonderful to see you all here today. The weather is wonderful, you know, the atmosphere here is wonderful. We've actually had a month of a break kind of thing, so it's really nice to be back together, a little bit out of practice. But it's an absolute pleasure to host Josef today. And Josef has, of course, been with us already in 2023. We were just talking about this. It's wonderful to see fellows returning. We
Thank you for letting me.
You enjoyed your time here. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today. As always in the IIS, we will be discussing, and we're always discussing the most exciting, the most kind of challenging, the most controversial interdisciplinary topics that there are to discuss. And I think Josef's topic is one that is close to so much of the research that is happening at Loughborough, not just, of course, in the sport, but also in social science, in political science disciplines. So, without any further ado, we'll invite Josef
Thank you
to
so
join
much.
us on the imaginary stage.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm going to try to stick with this imaginary stage. Kieran you'll have to tell me if I wander off. I tend to do that. Thank you so much for the kind introduction, and thank you to Loughborough University, the IIS, and the School of Sport, Health and Exercise Sciences, and the research team on sport, business and society for having me. It's my second time. I've been here for a month. I leave, the taxi is picking me up right after I finish this. So I've had, talking about it earlier, I've had a wonderful time, not least weather-wise, because when I left home, it was 40 centimeters of snow still and some -8, 10 degrees. So this has been very, very nice. So now when I'm returning, it won't be this. It will be like 5 degrees perhaps, but no snow, not green yet. But the best, one good thing is that I kind of skipped the ugly part of spring in north Sweden, where everything is just brown and dirty and messy. So thank you all for coming to my talk. Apart from being a fellow here and a previous visiting fellow, I work as a professor at Umeå University and Umeå School of Sports Sciences. I also work 20% as a visiting professor at the Norwegian School of Sports Sciences based in Oslo, Norway. And in this talk, I'm going to talk about the work me and a Norwegian colleague and a Finnish colleague have been doing the last almost 10 years on Sami sport, and try to conclude by proposing some sort of research agenda. We're are working right now to put in as many grant applications as we possibly can come up with to get someone to fund our work going forward. And yeah, let's just click. Am I staying within frame here, Kieran? Yeah, so together with Eivind Schille, Norway Inland University, and Kati Lehtonen at Jyväskylä University in Finland, we've done stuff on policy, governance, and organization issue connected to Sami sport and the Sami population a bit more broadly, even if we are scholars of sport. We are often interested in the contextual surroundings of the Sami people and the hardships they have gone through and still are going through. So this research interest began in 2014-15, where conflicts began to increase between the Sami population and the majority populations in these countries that I'm soon going to present to you. And they were very much heated around issues connected to sport, outdoor life, and tourism, because it's essentially conflicts over the use of land and water. But the interest was also sort of spurred by the governments in these countries, initiatives, programs, projects that were designed to push the opportunities for other underprivileged groups. And we saw kind of a conspicuous lack of focus on our own indigenous people. It seems like we were focusing a lot on doing things for other groups, and Sweden, Norway, especially, has been kind of known previously during 60s, 70s, and 80s for being kind of some sort of moral police around the world, telling the South African regime that they are not behaving well, or the Israeli government, or other places in the world, while we seem to be less occupied with what happens in our backyard. We also found during these studies and these years that it's kind of useful to use, not use, but yeah, that's my point, to kind of seize the opportunity to view the Sami issues as a lens through which we could place the spotlight on broader issues like democracy, community identity, and self-determination. I will try to allude to some of them in these slides. So a bit of context. The Sami people is traditionally a nomadic tribe or people. They still are, even though not to the same extent as historically, for reasons of modernity. They amount to somewhere around 80 to 160,000. As you can see, that's not very accurate, but that is due to the fact that it's in these nation states, Norway, Finland, Sweden, it's not allowed to register ethnicity in when you count people, or when you collect tax, or issue social security numbers. So we don't really know. Another fact going into the difficulty and really knowing how many they are is that Sami identity is something that you either prove on your maternal bloodline, or by your language, that you actually know one of the 11 Sami languages, or that you essentially identify as a Sami. So that makes it even more difficult to really know how many they are. As you can see, the light blue illustration also covers large part of the Kola Peninsula in Russia. This presentation and our studies cover mainly or exclusively the Sami people in Norway, Sweden, and Finland, because we have tried a number of times to connect with researchers in Russia, helping us out with their part of the Sami population, but so far we haven't been fortunate in that. So if you happen to know anyone working on indigenous issues in Russia, please send me an email, because it's kind of a lack in our research that we cover only 3 of the 4 countries. The common view of a Sami individual is that it is working with reindeer husbandry. Reindeer is you know what reindeers are? Yeah, Santa Claus and all that. Yeah. It used to be a wild animal. It's not anymore. Became domesticated during the 1600s. By the Sami, and has since then been the main source of livelihood for Sami people. Even though we have many Sami tribes, in lack of a better word, that are getting their income from other also traditional industries like forestry, fishing, hunting. History tells us that they have been around the Scandinavian peninsula for at least 10,000 years. They've been records of having a common Sami identity, even though, as with Native Americans, they are not really one people in that sense. They have a number of languages which the ones in the south wouldn't understand the ones in the Kola Peninsula, for example. But still, a common Sami identity has been around for somewhere around 3,000 years. They have been colonized for almost 1,000 years, which coincides with when Sweden became a kingdom, the Kingdom of Sweden, which we still are, and when Sweden, a Swedish king at the time, established the borders of Sweden as we kind of know them today. Those of you interested in history knows that Sweden used to be an empire in the 15 and 1600s with borders all the way over to today's Ukraine, Poland, and the Baltic countries, the Northern Europe, including Norway and Finland, and Denmark, of course. But since I think the last update on our geographical borders come from when we separated ourselves from the Union with Norway, or they separated from us, more correctly, in 1905. So Sweden is a very old country on one hand, but also kind of a new country on the other. So the colonization effectively has meant that until quite recently, Sami people have experienced restricted religious freedom. One part of establishing Sweden as a nation state during the 1500s was to Christian all of the not the wild, but the uncivilized people of the north. And has been so since quite recently. Also restricted use of language. They were forced to learn Swedish or a previous form of Scandinavian, which is an Old Norse language, and which is still the reason that Swedish, Norwegian, and Danish people can kind of understand each other. They have also experienced restricted building permissions. They were, in Norway, as an example, not allowed to build houses as late as 1981. Because, that's the official narrative, of course, the government's ambition to protect the Sami as a nomadic people. But still, effectively, they weren't allowed to build houses and settle because they were supposed to be nomadic. They were forced right up till almost the 90s to attend nomadic schools. They weren't allowed, to some exemptions, to take part in the mainstream public schools. They were restricted to attend these nomadic schools instead, which quite late were designed to take the Sami identity from them. They should be Christians, they should speak Swedish or Norwegian or Finnish, and yeah, the similar processes as we see worldwide when the majority population is trying to subdue the indigenous peoples of the land that they had occupied, even though it was quite a long time since we occupied their lands. Since the 1970s, we have witnessed quite the revitalization process, mainly in Sweden and Norway. Even so, more in Norway than in the other countries, which has resulted in the establishment of a specific Sami parliament, which is a pan-Sami establishment for the Sami people living in Norway, Finland, and Sweden, to give the Sami population their own voice, their own opportunity to have a say in policy issues that affect their lives. They have also experienced a number of court cases in where the Sami population have disputed the mainstream population's rules on how to use land and water, setting borders for land ownership by private persons or by the state. So some of these cases has actually led to granting the Sami people more of a more freedom in terms of having the opportunity to get livelihood out of the land and water on which they reside. Take a few examples to sell fishing permits and hunting permits, which usually traditionally has been the prerogative of the state. And also being granted more opportunity to express their specific culture. One of these areas is what we focus mostly on sport. Because as with language and religion, prior to, let's say, 1950s, they weren't allowed also to express their culture through reindeer racing or lasso throwing or other traditional Sami sport disciplines. So in our research so far, we have identified a number of issues that puts the Sami in a position from which it's very difficult to take part in and influence political decisions, raise necessary resources, and develop their collective identity, which, of course, as you can see in the heading here, comes from a number of borders that the majority populations through their governments have established. That cuts across both what we saw on the geographical borders of Sápmi, but also culturally. A first such border or issue relates to a number of complexities that stem from three borders dividing the Sami population and their issue. First of all, as you perhaps saw in the picture, even though you might not know of the official borders of Finland, Norway, and Sweden, very small countries in the periphery of Europe. And these countries have very different ideas on how much or little, in the Swedish case, they recognize the Sami as an indigenous people. So whilst Sweden might have done quite a lot lately in favor of Sami issues, they still don't recognize the United Nations Convention, ILO 169, that is the convention regulating how we have agreed on to treat indigenous populations. Norway has, Finland also have not, Russia hasn't. So it's a difference between them, which the Sami population, depending on where they happen to reside, are treated differently, which results in difficulties for them as a people to act collectively. We also see cross-sectoral boundaries, which means that their issues are alternately treated as a public issue or public policy concern when it comes to issues like the use of land and water, but as a civil society concern when it comes to, for example, the individual rights to join clubs, societies, associations. So, and that also differ between these three countries, again, seriously affecting their possibilities to act as a joint people. And in terms of cross policy, we see that both within these countries over time, but also more so between countries, some issues are posted by very different political government departments. So during the 70s, some issues were treated by the agricultural department. And of course, that has implications for how you view what are Sami issues. Well, they are agriculture. or cultural, and that of course affects into viewing some issue as mostly cultural, perhaps linguistic or religious issues. Nowadays, in both Norway and Sweden, they are under the auspices of the Department of Culture, but they've also, as in Finland, been regulated or handled by the Departments of Public Health. Since the establishment of the Pan-Sami Parliament, another kind of border issue has also been placed on them, because in many issues, when Samis try to voice concerns about issues that affect their livelihood or their possibility to express culture and identity, they are referred to their Sami Parliament. In effect saying that this is an issue that you need to resolve by yourself, even though the Sami Parliament has very little actual political influence. It's an influence that is still granted by the majority populations, and thereby the governments in these countries can actually from time to time decide on how much or how little say the Sami should have in various issues. So taken together, this results in a very fragmented policy landscape and an uneven playing field, depending on where you happen to reside in Norway, Sweden, Finland, or Russia. That really aggravates navigation. How should we maneuver this space to get our say? But also seriously inhibits cross-border cooperation, because they are actually forced to act within the borders of Finland or Sweden or Norway or Russia. A second issue relates to various policy issues that, on the one hand, could be interpreted as benefiting the Sami and their issues, but on the other hand, marked by the dotted line there, and perhaps as a consequence, also favor the majority population. So while we at the same time almost have seen truth and reconciliation commissions that we see kind of all over the world, issued by these governments to confess, describe, and try to correct previous wrongdoings and violations, and that they also have been, by the Supreme Courts in these countries, been granted some exclusive rights, in this example versus the Swedish state, to issue hunting and fishing licenses, which is kind of paramount to their livelihood, especially for those Sami who are not reindeer owners, because their livelihood is they can't depend on the ownership of reindeers. They need to find their kind of occupation and livelihood elsewhere, and having not been able to monetize the value of their lakes, sea lines, and lands has been a serious obstacle. But now in Sweden and Norway will seem to follow suit on that one, are granting the Sami a little bit more prerogative in that department. But on the other hand, and simultaneously, we also see policy decisions going in the complete other direction, with a recent example from last year, where Finland's Supreme Administrative Court overruled the Finnish Sami Parliament on the issue of eligibility for the Sami voter list, effectively annulling the election to the Finnish Sami Parliament, which is perhaps not a big deal if you compare to livelihood, but a very big deal if you view it as the Sami population's possibility to govern themselves. We also have an example where the Supreme Court of Norway ruled that the municipality of Karasjok, which is by the Sami viewed as the Sami capital, It's in Norway, and the court decided to rule that the land of the capital belongs to the state and not to its residents, which again might appear as a paper product, but that have severe implications both for the Sami self-determination, but also their possibility to monetize values from actually owning their own capital. So on the one hand, above the dotted line, we see increased recognition, but below the dotted line, and the examples can of course be made much more, we see intensified kind of battle lines, and perhaps as a result of the former. The more recognition and favors, so to speak, the Sami population gets, the more it catches the attention of the majority population. And the example of hunting and fishing licenses, that of course affects the majority population living in Sapmi, because they were used to having the right to hunt on their own land. I own this land. So the battle line is between a Swedish citizen, the Sami are also Swedish citizens, of course, but the majority population being used to having their land. And the dispute is, of course, when the state says that this is your land, you can build on it, you could have crops and you can have cattle, but the Sami, the indigenous heritage of the Sami also grant them the right to take their reindeer herds over your land or let them graze and so. So you can imagine that it's not just conflicts on paper, it's real conflicts between essentially neighbors that happens to be one or the other in terms of cultural or ethnic identity. A third relates to organizational issues that essentially either force the Sami to assimilate and emulate mainstream practices, or to form separatist practices that are not recognized in funding structure or political establishments. We see the logo of the Sapmi Football Association, which is a pan-Sami football organization that doesn't recognize the nation-state geographical borders, but instead refer to Sapmi as the original homeland of the Sami people. So the Sami, again with reference to the Native Americans, they are not placed in reserves or in settlements physically. And that stems from the fact that they were essentially nomadic people. So they are organized in what's called Sami villages, but that is not a village. It's a social construction that is based on family ties and cultural local belonging. So that's one thing that creates a hurdle for them. Another one is that a pan-Sami sport organization, such as the FA Sapmi, they are not allowed to be a member of any of these or the national sports confederations. They're not allowed to be a member of the Norwegian, the Finnish, or the Swedish Sports Confederation, because they do not recognize associations that don't follow national borders. Neither are they allowed to form a national sport organization because it's ethnic character. It's not allowed in Sweden, Norway, or Finland to say that this is the Assyrian Football Association or the we have a lot of Sudanese migrants. That's not allowed either. That doesn't mean that it's not allowed to have a community, but you can't form a national sport organization and thereby enjoy public subsidies, for example. Instead, clubs that offer Sami activities are encouraged to join existing national sport organizations And individuals are encouraged to join mainstream clubs. And that's the main argument from these governments, that we are all for your right to participate and exercise sport, but you should use the structures that we have set in place for those purposes. So this taken together results in difficulties in finding an organizational home for the organization of Sami sport. And it also results in less political influence as a result of that, and difficulties in applying for subsidies. And merely for the very basic fact that if you are a nomadic people that don't have a real home address, you cannot belong to a district or a regional sport federation, and thereby you get excluded from funding possibilities. No, going the wrong way here. A fourth relate to identity concern that again works both beneficial in some cases, but mostly less beneficial for the Sami. First, we see that specific Sami sports, and the most known ones are the lasso throwing competition and the reindeer racing competitions that we saw in the picture here. That's the reindeer racing. We see that it's an important part in constructing a specific Sami identity, but it at the same time, of course, as a result, reinforces ethnic boundaries. We see at the same time as it limits individuals exercising them as mainstream sport club do not offer these activities. So the Swedish government might say, we are happy to support your exercise of sport, please join this club. But the individual who want to do reindeer racing, they will not be able to do so because the Swedish sport club, of course, are less likely to offer reindeer racing because they don't know anything about reindeer racing. So while the small size and unique features of Sami sport might be a viable strategy to increase things like self-determination and self-governance, it is at the same time an obstacle in attempts to have say in matters that regards public funding to Sami sport. So what we see is assimilative effects due to government funding criteria and in these separatist practices that the Sami are forced to engage with because it's not offered by the mainstream sport clubs. I have clickers, I don't know why I didn't use it. So what are the kind of broader implications of that? We see that Sami sport as culture more broadly is expected to be both understood and celebrated as something exclusive. We see that the city where I come from, Umeå, was the European capital of culture a couple of years ago. And at the inauguration of that grand event, of course, the Sami were used as the cultural flair of the whole event, using them to display their fantastic clothing, their reindeers, and what have you. So at the same time as the mainstream society is very keen on using the Sami identity to signal diversity and pluralism, and a potential partner to mainstream sport when bidding for events. We saw that it's been a while now, but the Olympics in Lillehammer in '94, during that opening ceremony, what did we see there? We saw a lot of Sami expressions, so they're kind of useful for that purpose. but also to reach specific target groups, because as minority populations more broadly and specifically indigenous people, they are often struck by less quality of life, less physical quality of life, but also psychological quality of life. So reaching the Sami population is also sometimes used as a means to signal that we're trying to correct these differences between the suicide rates, for example, among the Sami, compared to the majority population, which is, I don't have the numbers, but you can see in any paper how the differences are vast. We also find that it seems easier and of course less controversial for these nation states to financially support individual sporting conditions. It's not a problem to tell individuals that you have the same opportunity as anyone else to seek membership in a sport club and play football. And you will get subsidies for that, and you will get the opportunity to use facilities and all that. But it's a completely different thing to kind of politically and financially back collective and organizational conditions for Sami sport organization, because that kind of runs counter to the egalitarian principles that the Scandinavian countries has kind of built their cultural identity on. Should be equal for everyone, even if it means that it's essentially not equal. So what we find is that while integrated organization, Sami and the majority population together, might create more favorable conditions for individual participants and local community. If I, as a Sami individual, grow up in a remote village in the north of Sweden, it would be favorable for the local community of that village if I play football with my majority population peers. It seems less favorable for the development of a local and national indigenous identity, because the individuals are more or less forced to join mainstream club and are therefore less likely to be able, for financial reasons mostly, to form their own clubs where they can develop their own ethnic identity. So, and in turn, such conclusions can be used to, we're trying to do that as we speak, to propose a research agenda moving forward. Because what we find is that on the one hand, we see these disputes over the significance of Sami identity. What should it and what does it mean to me, Sami? What opportunities should I be given, for example, which tend to lead to conflicts over resources, most often tied to the use of land and water, which kind of leads to the perceived need, both by Sami population and majority population alike, to separate and to have a special treatment. But on the other hand, we see that alongside we have ideas, national ideas on affording similar opportunities to all members of the community, which leads to inclusion efforts. We should be together. So it doesn't matter if you're Sami, a refugee from Ukraine, or a majority Swede, we should all be together in the same sport club. Which leads kind of to the perceived need for equal treatment, whatever equal really means. And such conflicts can be conceptualized in theories of social organization, which I tried to be a student of, as the specialization integration dilemma. We use the similar means for similar goals. So what we want to do, and hopefully get funding for, is to take cue from our studies so far, to kind of investigate the prospects of equal opportunity, which is kind of the end goal for everyone, more or less, at least in our societies, that lie in the two opposing principles. And we would like to use sport kind of as a natural laboratory to see whether we can find expressions of, illustrations of a integration organization principle and a separation or a specialization illustration or manifestation to investigate which one of them leads to what. What do we get if we keep them separate? And what do we get if we try to integrate? So we're designing studies that tries to capture all the organizational layers of these issues, starting out with the top layer being the pan Sápmi parliament, but we also have national Sami parliament. We have a Swedish one, we have a Norwegian one, and a Swedish one, and to investigate policy text to see whether where ambitions are going. And what the at least theoretical implications of one or the other might be. But also on the level of the layer below, to interview people at joint Sápmi sport federations, like this FA Sápmi, the football one. But also compare them to nation state specific, the Finnish Sami Sport Federation, the Norwegian and the Swedish Sami Sport Federation, and see what kind of solutions they are devising, and theoretically and hopefully more practically, empirically see what kind of consequences one or the other might have. But we are, both me and Kati and Eivind, we are and have always been very interested in the local. And we all live on the traditional homeland of the Sápmi. So we have in the town where I live, we have Sami sport clubs, and in Elverum was where Eivind live, and in Jyväskylä where Kati lives, there are Sami sport clubs. So we would also like to investigate and talk to kids about their experience of being a football player in the Umeå football club, compared to being a football player in Umeå Sápmi football club, to see whether there are any differences when it comes to impact on participation. Is it more tempting or attractive to be a part of sport if you can connect it to your ethnic identity, or is it more tempting to be with your classmates in the mainstream sport club, so to speak? But also in terms of organization and society, to look for issues, broader issues connected to equal opportunities. I'm happy to take questions on anything, and propositions of doing something completely different. Thank you so much.